Okay, so the question is, will one airbrush do it all? Well, short answer, yes. This little tiny one will paint the same thing this big gun will. It'll just take a whole lot longer. And that's the reason why there are several, not only different types, brands, sizes, makes, models. There's just endless airbrushes out there. But they all have a general purpose in mind. The only one of these that I do not, or only two of these that I do not use, is this one, which is a siphon. It sucks the paint up out of this jar through this little spigot valve that you turn for more airflow or more paint flow up out of here, because the air comes through here and sucks it up out of this and mixes and you spray. That's how this works. That's why when you see these guys using them, they're usually like t-shirt artists. They have their hands like this so they can control that as they're going along. If they want it tight, they lower it down, and if they want it wide open, they open the fan, and that's why they use two hands. And you will probably, unless you're doing something specific and have it set at a, and then you can do whatever, but you'll have to keep going back and forth with your hand to adjust it. I've used one time when I very first thought, I'm gonna airbrush something. That's a whole different subject. It was Hot Wheels cars. I was getting into doing those at the time, and I thought, I'm gonna airbrush paint them. Well, I could not get this to operate well. You got to mix the paint just right to get it to pull up, and to me it was just too frustrating for what I wanted to get out of it, when I could just set the item outside and just go with a spray can and it was done. So I got turned off from airbrush because of this, because I couldn't get it to work. And then not this one, but a different one. And then eventually I just talked myself into it, and I bought a compressor kit that came with this one, and this one, and a handful of paints and a few cleaning tools and da-da-da. Well, initially I fell in love with this one. This has a .03 needle in it that you probably won't even see. I'll try to put it on this dark. Oh, you know what? I don't have a spring in this one. This is why I bought this one. Typical rookie mistake. Took it apart and washed it, and then the cup that had the parts in it just went down the sink, and that's where the spring went. But I would just switch back and forth, take spring out of one and put it in the other. I needed to use it at the time. But anyway, back to the kit. When I saw this, I was like, oh no, I'm not even going to attempt that. And I have never used it. Excuse me. It's brand new still. It's never had paint through it, ever, at all. Never even had air through it. I've never even put an air hose to it. This one I use a lot, and I still use it. You'll see me use it a lot on a lot of projects. I clean this spotless every time I use it. And I always put a little tiny dab of oil right there where the rocker meets the little valve that goes back and forth. It rides alongside the pivot point there. I always put just a little drop so it doesn't wear it out as quickly. But this is a really nice, I have such luck with this. This is a very entry level. This is a $29.99 airbrush, and it's never been a serious problem. It's usually the problems are I'm trying to mix or trying to spray too thick of a paint through a small .0, or .02 needle. That's usually the problem. This isn't the problem. So usually I cheat and I turn the air up a little bit and I just go. Because when you're doing something with this gun, it's 1 or 2 drops, and you just got to do something real quick. So you don't really want to take the time to put 2 drops of paint, 1 little tiny drop of whatever thinner, and then back spray it, when you know you can just go get it to the tip and just go and you're done. It's how this works, and it works great like that. I love this airbrush for that. This one used to do that pretty well with an 03 needle. Well, the needle may be in it. Yeah, the needle's in it. This one's just a tad bigger than this one. That's an 02, this is an 03. I could usually paint pretty decent thin lines with this one when it was working pretty well, but it's more clunky. It's not put together as well. This is also a very cheap brush, probably in the $30 range as well, but it worked really well for the longest time. This was the brush I used to spray big models, car models, whatever. I use this all the time. I learned that there are certain things about brushes like this, like the tub that doesn't come up. It makes it just a little harder to clean and stuff like that. And so you want to upgrade eventually. And being that I lost that spring, that gave me this idea that I needed to upgrade. And right away, you pick this up and you pick this up, and it's like, oh, okay, now I get it. And this is a very entry-level Iwata, and it's called the Neo Made for Iwata. It's not actually made by Iwata, although right there it says Iwata. So it is an Iwata, it just happens to be made somewhere else. I don't know. Little Iwata guy said, hey, can you make these for me and mass produce them? And whoever said, yeah, sure, I can do that. And Iwata gave them the specs and the codes, and they make them. And that's just how it is. But this one is nice. This is like, yeah, I can almost, no, I don't want to say that, but some people can almost ballpoint pen write with this. It's really almost that good. And it mixes air and paint really well. I can't remember that word right off the top of my head, where you have to get the right air and paint mixture for it to spray really well. This one does that really well. Really well. I get a nice powder spray, really fine mist coming out of this gun. I love this gun. I call them guns because I'm so used to using these. That's why I keep calling all these. You hear me in my videos saying this is a good gun, because I'm so used to using guns. But just the mechanics in this one alone are there's way more threads, so when you screw something in, it's more secure. The needles are better quality. See how much longer that approach is to the tip, other than the one you saw before. It just kind of went to a .03. This one gradually goes to a .03, so you get a better airflow. There's just a lot of things that when you upgrade to. The very tip of the nozzle that needle sits in is a better quality metal. Just little things like that. Just anchoring them down. The clamp is more secure. It's got a better clamping system rather than just something that you're squeezing onto the needle. It's almost the size of the needle to start with, so you don't need to bear down on it. You just slightly, and it's tight. That's not coming out. And it's just better quality stuff. You can feel it all the way down. There's no slop. When you move it, you move the whole airbrush. Whereas when you pulled that needle out and move it, it would kind of go click, 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 click. There's a little slop all the way down through. This one does not have that. There's seals and things to hold it in a position, I guess you might say, but just makes it operate so much smoother. So when you pull that needle or that trigger back really slow, it's going straight back. It's guided all the way. It's not guided just here or just back here, or so it doesn't have any wobble parts, because there's air going into this and it's going to force things to move. So the more secure everything is, the better you're going to get control. The springs in these are better. They're a little bit more rigid. I've taken the spring out of this one before and used it in this one just because I wanted to feel if that would make a difference, and it did. It made a big difference. You may notice all these except this one, and of course this one, have quick release. All my air guns are quick release. The compressor's on right now, but it won't. I can switch to any of these immediately. Sometimes I do. Sometimes I'll have this one out because it's a .03 needle and do something real quick, like if I'm stenciling and I want to shadow a stencil line. This gun's nice for that because I can really hold tight next to the stencil and just fine spray. And then if I want to cover real quick, I can just pop this off, put this on my holder, and go to my .05 needle, and then I can spray something as big as like a shovel head, really fast. It's a .05 needle. Or I can also slowly bring this one out and get a fan probably as tight as this coming out of here. So I can, do some quick lettering. If I wanted to do a for sale sign, I could shadow it with this one really easy with a .05 needle even. The only thing I don't like about this one is the fact that I can't take this cup off of the actual airbrush itself for better cleaning, but it has a huge chamber flow, which means I can get, like I use these old, you can go to the dollar store and buy like 50 of these for $1. Well, these get right down in there, and you put your right cleaners and stuff in there and you do that, and you rinse it and backwash it, they come out spotless. Because it's a really big chamber down inside, so it holds a lot of paint. There's a lot of cheaper ones have a really small chamber down inside, so it holds a lot more paint around the needle itself, and it'll plug easier. Where a big chamber's nice because you can throw some cleaner at it quick, loosen this, move this a little bit to soften up the paint that's on there, and then take your brush and squish it around, and keep moving that and get it cleaned all the way off. Put it back together, tighten her up, and you're ready to go again. Because it's such a big chamber down inside, it's easy to clean it. And so this gun's really nice for switching on the go. This is great for heavy coverage because it's got a .05 needle. Like for instance, doing model cars, because it's a big body. You set this up on your paint rack and you spray it with this. You got to come back. You got to go way back away from it like a spray can, because it's going to cover it really quick. And I mean really quick. Depending on how far you go back, of course. I mean, if you go wide open, you're going to flood it. You're going to wish you didn't. That's what's going to happen. But then, on to my favorite. This is the reason why I call all these guns, because when I really want to paint something, this is the bad boy that I bring out. This has needles. It has the .8 in it now, .08. Excuse my arm over the front of the camera here. I just want to get them out. It comes with 3 needles. It has the .08 in it now, and it has a .05 and then also a .03, which they didn't give me a case for, because obviously you got to have one in the gun all the time anyway. But the .03 is in the .08 case now. So I have the 8 in there because I was doing a job that I needed to spray something with a lot of coverage, and it was almost like a bathroom sized garbage can type thing. It was just something I needed to cover really quick, and believe me, you pull the trigger on this bad boy and you're going to get some paint. This is a single action, whereas these are all, except this one, this is single action also, and these are all dual action. What dual action means as compared to single action, as soon as I pull this back, I'm getting air and paint. There's no shut off, whereas these, you push down and you get just air. You got to come back to get paint. So that's a dual action. One 2. Whereas this is 1, go. But the good thing about a gun is you usually have multiple adjustments and on the gun, but multiple functions. Several different cups. This cup here I only use for spraying clear coat, because usually the clear coat you use more of. So I only use this for clear coat. So if it gets a little gummy inside, I don't mix it with any paint or anything else other than just clear coat. And I clean it really good, but clear coat is inevitable. You're always going to get something on the lid or something. So it only gets used for clear coat. And that's a big cup. This is my primary paint cup. Whenever I'm painting something that I want to get a lot of coverage on, this is what I use. And the reason why I like that is because I can see when I'm about to run out of paint. And you never want to leave a dry edge. So when this gets down to the point where I can't blow back without it making it, being a hassle, I immediately refill it again and dump what's there, because it's been dragging everything down the side that's been dried up. So eventually all that dried up is going to be sitting. So I leave and then I throw that out and rinse and then refill and go again, just so you don't have any spits toward the end of your spray. All these dual actions are notorious for it, but this one can also do it. This has several adjustments on it as well as far as a gun. This also has a few other screw-on bowls that we can put on it. Why, I don't know. I mean, this is like the size of a 0.03, so I guess if you're doing, something that only holds half an ounce of paint, and that, then you just put on a smaller one rather than having to fill this and have to clean it and whatever. But this one I always use. I just like to see the paint. It even comes with a little tiny one, 2 drops on this. It is easy to clean though. This is actually, truthfully, this gun is actually easier to clean than any of these, except maybe this one. I don't know, because I've never cleaned it. But this comes apart so easy. But back to the adjustments. I can adjust the amount of airflow that goes to the tip right here. I can shut it right off, so no air at all is going to the tip. No matter how far I pull that back, no air can push any paint. It's dead. By opening a little, now I get just a little bit of air, so I can do small shadow work or just a little bit of shading where I want to fine mist paint. Open it right, keep opening it, and more air you'll get to spray paint. This control back here controls how far the trigger goes back, which inevitably means how much paint you're going to get. So you actually have paint control now. So if you master by going in, see how short that is now? It's nowhere near the handle. Now you open this up and you can watch it move. We'll go back out. See how much closer that is? It's almost touching the handle. So you have control of the flow, how much flow of paint you have, as well as air. That's why I particularly like to use a gun on bigger projects or even some medium projects where I can control it right down and not have so much heavy coverage on something I don't want heavy coverage on. Say you're painting a Christmas tree ornament and you want the Christmas tree to be all green because it's made out of plywood, so you open everything wide open and now you want to paint little candy canes. Well, you don't want that much paint coming out to paint a little tiny candy cane, so you shut everything down a little bit and you can fine tune, do it all with just this one gun. It's kind of neat. It's a really great everyday crafter kind of gun. So if I had to say yes to, if you can buy one airbrush to do it all, this would be it right here. Get a gun that's adjustable by needle and air pressure and flow, and you'll be happy. But if you do intricate, very intricate, where you want a fine line, then no, you're going to have to go with something this small, or at least this small, to an 03 or even an 02. I think they make even a 0.1 or a 0.015 or something like that, because a lot of guys, including me, will take off just a very tip of the needle protector, so you can see the tip. And when you're really good at your air control and you can just, really pinpoint, say like you were painting your letters, your initials on something like that small, you can see the needle and you can get right down there and just pull that back slightly, and you can really get a small. So a lot of people will, prefer a gun that shoots very detailed lines rather than a gun that does it all. So as far as my favorite, I would have to say these two. Not because they're Iwata, but just because they're built a little better. These could be Badger and built better, and I'd say the same thing. Or some other brand, and I would say the same thing, just because they're the best built of all these in here. This is my favorite to use and my favorite to clean, because it's just simple. A couple of parts and this bad boy comes apart. I actually got to be careful because you take this apart and everything all comes out of the front, unlike these where you take the back apart and you can almost pull everything out from the back. It's not recommended when you just saw me do that earlier with this, when I took the thing off and I loosened this and I pulled the needle through. Well, it's not recommended to do that as you're working, because what you're doing is you're dragging paint through this whole system. What you should do is pull the needle apart up here and push the needle through, so none of the paint residue and gets dragged up through this whole system, because that'll eventually just work its way back down the needle and you'll be spitting it. But if you're taking it apart because you're cleaning it, then it doesn't matter at all. I even do it as I'm spraying because I know how far to go with it. You will learn that too. You'll learn how far to pull the blade back, because sometimes you just need to bring it back a little bit, because it's the housing that the needle sits in that's plugged, not the needle itself. So you bring it back a little bit and just give it a little poke with some air, and it pushes that little plug through, and then you're ready to go. So it really depends on how far you go. Don't pull it back a lot so you're dragging paint all the way through your seals, in other words, because all you're really doing is putting a thin line of paint on your needle all the way up through now, and you really don't want to do that. So, but in that regards, this one is a lot easier to clean because of that. All the needles are huge. They're like bicycle spokes. So they're really easy to clean. You just take them out and you put them in your fingers and you stick them right back in there ready to go. Yeah. If you can't get paint to flow down that needle, then you're going to have a hard time with airbrushing in general, I think. But maybe not, because it does take time, don't get me wrong. I'm far from mastering any of these. This one I can do pretty well. These two I can do really well, and what helps is because they're built better. This one I did kind of get down, but then I lost the spring and all my talents went to this one. But this one here, I can do anything with that. Anything at all. I could spray a door on a car and do some kind of graphics on the door with a smaller needle, and then go down to a smaller needle and then shade the graphics, and then go back to the big needle and then put this on and clear coat the whole thing, all with one gun, all with this. So that's my more versatile, more fun gun, because I know I can just bring this to a job and do everything I need to do without having to bring all these with me for shadow details with this, because it's going to be a big enough project where I can shadow line or something with this. Because an 03 is no different than bringing this. You just get different control because you have this, like I said, is 2-stage. I can just get very tiny little bit of air and very tiny little bit of paint, so you get a lot more control out of these than you will this, because you'll have to master that control first by controlling the air, controlling the paint flow, and then pull the trigger and go at it. So you have to do all the manual work, whereas this one you just pull the trigger back slowly and you can do all that. Big difference in how each gun works, but I can do the same job that this does, being an 03 needle, with this 03 needle. It just takes a little longer because I have to adjust a few more things, and that's it. Maybe work the paint a little different, from one to the other too, because one may need a little thinner paint because of the way it flows, or just something, and that comes with time also. This one here, I mix the paint the same as I mix for an 03, even though it's an 05, because it just flows better. I could leave it a little thicker and maybe fight with it if I wanted to, and screw around and eventually get it to spray right. But if I mix the paint the same as I mix for an 03 needle, I know it's going to spray. I just come back a little bit further and a little bit less air, maybe turn my air down, because on my hose I have an adjustment also for air. I can turn this all the way off, so no gun at all can get air from the compressor. Dead. And just open this a little and get as much air as I need. So it's basically, this is what this does. Let's get very little air. Like fine detailing, even with a 5.0 brush, fine detailing doing shadows, I can turn this air just right and get that. I can barely feel that. And if that was paint coming out, it would take forever. Like if you're doing nails, you put your nails in your little nail thingy, and to cover that, you rest your finger and you're doing nails, that's what you want to do. Very little air. And you can do it all with a .05, just by controlling your air. Anyways, that's my little chat about airbrushes and why I personally have so many. Take away this one because I don't even use it, and this one because I can't use it. These are my working airbrushes right here. These are the ones I use whenever I'm doing anything I do. Most of the time, all these come out within a day's project. This one I will use for the super fine details because it's a .02. This one I will use because it's easier to use an 03 detailing than it is to put the 03 in there and screw around with all the settings. This one I'll use to get a lot of coverage, but thin air spray. If I'm doing, like I say, like a model car, a 125 or 127 scale, 124 scale, whatever they are, tabletop model, if I'm doing one of those, I ain't going to want 50 pounds of air coming out, because inevitably you're going to not be able to control a lot. You get down to where you want to do around a border or something, you're not going to want full blast. Like if you're backing up and you're covering the whole car with one color, that's different. You're spraying it like a spray can and you're going. But if you're doing a fade, say like you're doing a Volkswagen Beetle, and there's already paint on there, well, you can't do that because you're going to cover most of the other paint, and you want to fade, well, then you can reduce your air, and you do all that with a 5.0 just by getting in there with less air and getting it a little closer and starting your fade, and then work your way out and open your needle more, and work your way out, open your needle more, and it just helps blend your fade in more, and you can do that all with a 5.0. So I like this one a lot too, where this, if I tried to do it with the 5.0 needle, I could. It would take a little bit to get it set up, but that's all I'd be able to do at that moment is that fade, and then I have to reset the gun again to do something else like major coverage or whatever. So each one of these has a purpose. That's why they're all out. When I start my day's work, they all come out, because somewhere along the line usually I got to use one or the other, which is again why they all have quick release. Because if I need this one, I need it right now. I don't need to unthread something and watch my compressor go and then have to wait for that to fill up and da-da-da-da-da. So that's my setup. That's why I have it. That's what I do with them. Not saying you need to run out there and buy all the airbrushes in the world, because you really don't, because you can get away with doing everything you need to do with just these right here. And in fact, this one. If you're going to buy one airbrush to get started, go out and buy the Neo for Iowata, get a .03 needle, and practice. Just practice, practice, practice. And you'll find that you can do with this, most of the stuff that you can do with this. I say most because there's a lot of things that you, like say you want to do just that eye socket, and you want just the eye socket and a little bit of shadow around it. This will do it better than that. So there are limits to this. This will do it, but it'll make a bigger shadow around it. Or you'll have to pinpoint it in the center and hope the overspray doesn't go outside the socket as much. Where this one you wouldn't have to worry about it. You just spray in the center, and you'd actually have to go to the edge of that socket and you spray around it in order to get that shadow, because that gun would not, you wouldn't be able to do it with one spray. It wouldn't work. You'd have to actually move the brush. Where this one, you put in the center and give it a, and it would probably fill that whole thing real quick. So it just depends on what you're doing with your airbrushes. This one here, you can do each one of these gill plates individually, where this one you'd probably have to do all this is one, and then maybe all this is one. You know what I'm saying? So it just depends on how detailed you really want to be with what you're doing. This one, you couldn't do any of it except paint the whole thing white. That's just the way it is. Same with this one, the 05. You can do some shading, but the overspray, if I tried to just do freehand this right to the edge, the overspray would be almost 1/8 of an inch outside that, because the fan is too big. That's the whole idea of it. So anyway, again, that's my rambling on airbrushes and what I do with them. Hope you got something out of this anyway, and actually hope you go out and get one, because the more people I see beginning, the more I like to watch them progress, because it is fun to see people get better and better at doing this. I still watch people at my level and above, and even way beyond, because I still learn things from people that haven't even gotten to what I can do yet. I even watch them, because there you bring me back to a point of things of, oh yeah, I should try that again. You know, I haven't done that lesson in a long time. Learning lessons, that's one of the best things. Take your brush and make a circle, and then try to shade the outside of that circle like it's a ball. Then shade the inside of that circle like it's, you know, the sun is coming from this way. Just practice a bit, you know, the different lessons. I remember doing all those lessons just to learn how to control your air back and, or your paint back and forth with the full air. And yeah, it was fun. It was actually fun. Once I got it and understood how to mix the paint and get the flow through the gun and everything, then it was actually fun to do those lessons, because they were working and they actually taught me something. But if you're trying to learn the lessons and learn the gun and learn how to mix paint, it can get frustrating. So just take it one step at a time, learn the gun, practice with water. Water sprays out of any gun perfectly, no matter what. You know, whatever you spray on is going to get wet. So if you spray on paper, it's going to get shitty after a while. But you know, maybe drop a thing of food coloring in it just to have it so it gives you color. Just practice the control of the needle, so you get a, and then open it up a little bit more, and then bring your hand back so it's not so spiderwebby. Like if you blew it with a straw, you ever do that? Put paint in a straw and blow it. That's what an airbrush does. Well, you can control that spiderweb spray by just backing away from the paper a little bit, or closing down the air a little bit more. And you got to learn all that before you can actually start doing any kind of decent artwork where your paint overlaps, because you don't want a straight line and then have a spider web of the next color going over it, because you can't hide that. You got to start all over with the color it's spider webbed over, you know. And you'll learn those things as you go. Anyway, I'm rambling. What's the new term? I digress.